Okay, so I'm going to cover a couple examples, going over finding the length of the midsegment of a trapezoid, and also just how to set up equations using the midsegment of a trapezoid. So the first 5 examples here are pretty easy. If you recall from my notes on trapezoids, the midsegment is just equal to half of the sum, of the lengths of the bases added together. That sounds way more confusing than it really is, or maybe you don't think so. But this question mark, that's what we're solving for, the midsegment, so I just labeled that as my x is equal to half of 7 plus 11. So again, pretty easy example, you get 9, and that's, what you do for the next 4 problems. Okay, if you scroll on down to number 6, now we have the length of the midsegment, but we want to find the length of one of the other bases. So it's still the same equation, it's just our x is going in a different spot. Okay, so I have it set up here, 12.1 equals half of x plus 10.8. Okay, now 2 different ways we could go. Two different ways we could solve this equation from here. You might just be in, like, you see parentheses, you distribute, like that's just like what you do. You can do that. You can multiply the x and the 10.8 by 1/2 or 0.5, okay? Or I can cancel out the 1/2 here by multiplying both sides of the equation by 2. If I multiply 2 times 1/2, I just get 1. So that cancels out the 1/2, and I have x plus 10.8 equals 24.2. Okay, now pretty simple equation. Just subtract your 10.8, and your final answer is x equals 13.4. Okay, now I will just say here, when I'm teaching this, sometimes there are students that find just a slight bit of a shortcut to setting up this equation. It's hardly a shortcut. And I don't teach shortcuts, but if you kind of discover the pattern, if you will, you can maybe skip a step as you write out these equations. I'm not going to show you what it is, though, so if you don't find it, that's totally fine. You can just set up the equations and solve it like normal. Alright, now I'm going to scratch up to number 11. Okay? I did set it up. Oh, look! Alright, so now you can see our x isn't representing like one of the lengths of the bases or the midsegment. It's just a variable that we need to solve for. So if you're solving for x, you need an equation. Lucky for us, we know how the midsegment is related to the bases of a trapezoid, so we can just set it up. 31 equals half of 13 plus 10x minus 21. Okay? Now I just combine my like terms here. 13 and minus 21 gives me negative 8. Again, at this point, you can either distribute the 1/2 or multiply both sides by 2. So that cancels out the 1/2. I get 62 equals 10x minus 8. You add 8 to both sides. 70 equals 10x. Divide by 10. X equals 7. Okay. There it is. That is how you go about setting up these trapezoid problems to solve for x. Pretty much from 11 to, I can't get it, 22, that's all you're doing. You just, whatever the midsegment is, that's equal to half of the top plus the bottom, okay? So even if, like, you get to 18 here, okay, I'm struggling. Even though that's like 6x minus 14, and now the x is with the midsegment, that's fine. You're still just going to set it up. 6x minus 14 equals 1/2. 24 plus 44. And then you'll solve. Okay, now, here, am I going to multiply both sides by 2? No, I'm just going to add 24 plus 44, and then I'm going to cut that in half. Okay? Just a little heads up there. Okay, I just want to go over When you get to 23, you can see you're not working with the mid-segments anymore. You are working with the angles of a trapezoid, and you'll notice these markings. They should be familiar to you, especially after doing the proofs chapter. Means those are congruent. That means it's an isosceles trapezoid. And so these two angles add up to 180. Now that's true for any trapezoid, not just isosceles trapezoids, but you would do 180 minus 61 to get the measure of the angle there, which would be 119. And then we come to number 29. Okay, we have x. We need to solve for x. Sorry. What do we do here? Gosh, this is a doozy. All right, so it's an isosceles trapezoid. And if you remember from, weeks ago, the week I was in school and you were learning about parallelograms, you learned in parallelograms that opposite sides and opposite angles are congruent, but that is not true in trapezoids. All right, so you just get that, out of your membrane right now. But this is an isosceles trapezoid, so I know this angle C is also 145 degrees. I can fill that in. And then what do we know about these two angles here? They add up to 180. So you can just take 145 plus 12x minus 1 equals 180 degrees. And then just solve for x from there. Okay, so you just have to pay attention to what angles would add up to 180 and which ones are congruent, because then you look at number 30 and it's an isosceles trapezoid and you have base angles. So these are just going to be congruent. 85 equals 16x minus 11. Okay? So you might just have to reason through some of those problems. Alright, I will have the answer key posted for you so you can check that out. Just let me know if you have questions. Thanks. Bye.